Had a really good question the other night, second in a row actually, from the Late Kick inbox as we were putting together the Late Kick Extra podcast that is released on Wednesday. And it's there for the whole week if you want to listen to it. And Cat Train asked a question that I don't think we've been asked this entire offseason. We've been asked about underachieving programs a whole lot. But Cat Train said, very simply, 3 words, most overachieving programs in America. So that's 5. And how do you gauge this? Because you can think this through with me, because I know everyone has their own criteria. How do you gauge it? I'll tell you how I gauge it. Overachieving programs, I just want to know about your results compared to your resources. And to me, there's nowhere else to start but Duke and what Dave Cutcliffe has done at Duke. I want you to think about something. I had to look this up to make sure. Since 2013, in what world did you ever think you'd hear this stat? Since 2013, Duke has more seasons of 7+ wins than the University of Texas. Yeah, Texas. And so I don't care what world we're living in. I don't care who the coaches have been at Texas. I don't care if they've been under sanctions and had a cannonball tied around their ankle and been tossed to the bottom of the Gulf. That is pretty darn impressive. So Dave Cutcliffe, not only has he made Duke football more than respectable, he has universal respect from every coach in America. Every coach that you talk to, it's that guy. It's Dave Cutcliffe. And when they coach against him, it's always, they may have a superior roster, so they win the game, but at the post-game presser, they're so ashamed because they know we just beat them 38-21, but he really outcoached us. And they don't want to say that because that's terrible, but they know it. They know it in the following day's film session. They know it. Dave Cutcliffe's done a phenomenal job, and believe you me, he could have been on the next thing smoking out of town several times very recently, and he's chosen to stay there. Some people are just happy. How about Boise State? This has been a several coach endeavor too. You tell me what advantage you have in Boise. Sometimes programs exceed expectation or they fly well above the pack because they just have more resources relative to their competition. Boise is the opposite. And when Peterson really started that rollout there, they were the opposite. They were competing against teams like Fresno State, for example. Fresno is in California. Boise's in the middle of Idaho. You should be at a disadvantage. Not only is it a level playing field, you should be at a disadvantage at Boise State. If you're trying to convince a kid to leave California and come to Idaho versus teams in California saying, hey, just stay home. Like, what do you think is going to win there more times than not? So you had to be going above and beyond, above and beyond, above and beyond, and you had to have such a culture in place that it overcame all that. And they built it, and now they've sustained it. And every year, they are a version of a contender. They may be a more serious contender some years than not, but there's no logical way to explain what they've been able to do unless you get down into the more granular level and you just understand. That's why all these coaches use the word culture. That's why every business uses the word culture. And it sounds so cliched and you think, oh, this is just a talking point. No, it's not. Because when you have it, most places don't have it, but when you find the rarity, the exception, where they do have culture, they got it at North Dakota State, for example. We could easily include them here. They got it at Boise. They got it at Boise State. This is what happens. It almost gets to the point where from the outside, you look at it and say, that seems like it'd be hard to screw up. No, they're just making it look that easy. Next up, Iowa State. Let's go to the Big 12. Iowa State, I've developed this fascination with Iowa State. 7-6. That was their record last year. And do you know what people called it? People had the audacity to either whisper it or outright say that it was a down year because people expected a little bit more. I'd be lying if I said I didn't expect a little bit more, but I'm certainly never going to call 7-6 a down year at Iowa State. They have. Matt Campbell has done a great job at this. They've established a well-defined brand, well-defined identity. The other night we were talking about the mood tracker for the ACC. And I said for Virginia Tech, everyone there wants to know the same thing. What is our identity? Like, how do people identify us coast to coast? They don't have that problem at Iowa State. Everyone knows what they're about. Before Matt Campbell got there, just to contextualize that quote-unquote 7-6 down year, before he got there, their last season of 8+ wins had been the year 2000. It's a rarity to be winning 7 games there. Now it's perceived to be a down year. That is the definition of overachievement. And now everyone continues to ask the question, oh, where's he going to go? Where's he going to go? And it may ultimately be that he does leave there. But whether he leaves there or not, you take solace in the fact that as an Iowa State fan, as an Iowa State graduate, as an Iowa State student, you've either got a world-class head coach that's yours, or if he ever leaves, the overall stature of the program has been raised to the point where you may be able to attract legitimate candidates, the likes of which maybe you couldn't attract just a short generation ago. Now, here's the one I was going to bring up. This is an entirely different track. So don't identify this team or the reasons why I'm going to give you for this team with Duke or with Boise. But I'm going to mention Auburn to you. Hold your horses. Just settle down for a second. Here's the reason for Auburn. Think it through with me before you call it crazy. Auburn's got a bunch of resources. Auburn's got a big stadium. Auburn's got nice facilities. They've got all that stuff. I know that. Here's what else they have. Now, I want you to tell me what history suggests they should be. Their arch rival, the University of Alabama, is in the middle of a dynasty the likes of which the sport has never seen. And that really goes even back to what Bryant was able to do there. And so that's happening in Alabama. What was Auburn in the majority of the time that Bryant was at Alabama? Think about just that comparative analysis over time. Then add this into the equation. Georgia, their number 2 rival, is on the precipice of being a championship team. They've already played for one. They're recruiting at a top 3 level annually. They are right there. So not only are you bumping up against one of the greatest dynasties in the history of college football with your arch, your number 2 rival is right there behind them, and your number 3 rival just won the national championship. Those are the 3 big boys, in order, sequentially, that Auburn would call their 1, 2, 3 rivals. Historic dynasty, borderline championship program, current national champion. What does history say Auburn should be? Couldn't care less who the coach is. What does history say Auburn should be? As I've told you recently, an afterthought, a total non-contender. They are a bug on a windshield. That's what history says they should be. And yet 2013, 2017, 2019, they beat Auburn, or they beat Alabama rather. Malzahn's beaten Saban more than anyone has. They've been a contender. They've gone to the SEC championship game. They played for a national championship in Malzahn's first year. No, they're not racking up championship rings. And yes, they have a lot of resources. But I'm asking you this, even with all that, you could pay the head coach $20 million. As long as those set of circumstances are still in place, who's coming in there and doing a whole lot better than Gus Malzahn's done? Now, I get some blowback on this from Auburn folks, because Auburn folks don't want to hear all that. They just want to look at the program in a vacuum. But you can't do that. If I were to take Auburn and drop them in, for instance, the ACC, they'd instantly be much more of a national championship contender every year, because you'd say to yourself, boy, if they get over Clemson, or maybe if they're good enough and they lose to Clemson, they can still get in. That's not the path. They play a few Clemsons. They play a few Tier 2 or Tier 1 programs per year in their division. So that's the plight at Auburn. So I know they don't compare to Duke, they don't compare to Iowa State, but for a different set of reasons. That's why I feel that way about Auburn. And I'll stay in the state of Alabama to wrap it up here quickly. UAB is like a total different story. What Bill Clark has done there is almost like in its own world. Most coaches would agree with this. What Bill Clark has done is he had UAB as legitimate, and then they dismantled the program. Not for 24 hours, 48 hours, for 3 years. They bring the program back. I can't stress this enough. The program did not exist. It was wiped off the face of the map for 3 years. Not figuratively, literally it didn't exist. Then they brought it back in 2017. 1 year later, 11-3, or they brought it back in 2018. Anyway, it took him 1 year, and they're Conference USA champions. Finished second in their first year back, won the conference the next year, and they were 11-3 last year. That's insane. And that's a guy who could go a lot of places too, and he just doesn't. He just likes it there. I've talked to people recently who think he won't leave there. If he did, though, he would have no shortage of suitors lining up at his front door.